Okay. All right. Hello, hello.
Hello, guys.
Hello, guys. Before we start, can you guys tell us if you can hear us well and see us well? Do we have the sound? Hello, Hannah.
We go
Hello,
first.
Anna.
Yes.
We have the sound. All right. So we're gonna slowly start with today's talk. Um, First of all, everybody, welcome. As a part of How to Rhino workshop, we have invited a very special guest who's joining us live tonight. He's a true leader and innovator in the intersection of architecture and technology. Please give a warm welcome for Oliver Thomas. Oliver is the founder of Facet Homes, a company that's dedicated to the digital fabrication and sustainability of homes. He's also the founder of Archi-Tech Network, a platform that is focused on education and innovation in architectural technology. And many of you probably know Oliver from the important work as former design technology manager at Bjarke Ingels Group. While at Big, Oliver played a key part in bringing new digital tools and advanced workflows in their famous world-class projects. You can see some of them behind Oliver. So yeah, Oliver, it's absolute pleasure to have you with us. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. It's a real pleasure. I've been a big fan of How to Rhino over the years, and I feel like we haven't collaborated actually. This is
Yeah.
our first kind of collaboration. We should.
Yeah, just like I mentioned earlier before the talk, like we kind of have the same type of we're in the same industry. We're doing similar stuff, similar things, and it's good that we finally meet.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm excited that it's actually live and it's on YouTube. So you guys, later on, we're gonna do some questions, and Oliver is gonna be able to kind of answer. We had some questions from the community, and we're gonna do them at the end. And now, yeah, Oliver, just tell us first of all a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I'll stick mostly to the computational Rhino Grasshopper side, but
Sure.
you know, like many people, I studied as an architect. I didn't study any special kind of computational masters or anything like that. Back in my day, sounds like makes me sound a little bit old actually, but there wasn't as many like masters and courses that you could do online. But yeah, I studied as an architect, and I think it was over the years as a designer, I started to pick up Grasshopper once I graduated, and Rhino I was using in university, and I was playing with Grasshopper, but I was at a university that didn't really adopt it that well. There was no one there I could really ask, right? And when you're learning Grasshopper,
Same story.
Same
yeah,
here.
like if you didn't know to flatten a list or even what the hell a list is, you'd just be stuck for like months. um, so yeah, I think I started to work in practice. Actually, maybe this is a good time to share that little
Sure.
I've got a couple of little slides that just explain this journey in a really simple way. So in short, my career was kind of split between these three companies in working as an architect, right? I graduated, I worked for IDAS, which is a massive architecture firm.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of like, they're based in Hong Kong, went over to Hong Kong to work for them. And that's really where I started to become like the Grasshopper guy in the team. And we were doing like, these kind of crazy China projects that was doing a lot of grasshopper facades and stuff like that. And then like from the render, it would just get built, right? And you do some like DD stuff and use a bit of computation in it, but it would quickly become just manual, not even doing BIM models and stuff like that. And I would say at that point, it became like a intermediate kind of grasshopper guy at that point. But I was really curious, like, how do you actually build these facades, right, that we're designing? I had no clue, if I was honest. And that's when I found a company called Fronts, who were also based in Hong Kong, met them at Smart was it Smart Geometry? And they focused on like building facades for like architects, like these crazy projects. They would be the ones that the contractors would call.
Mhm.
And I got hired to work on this Morphosis Hotel with Zaha Hadid. I think it's now called City of, well, it was called City of Dreams. It's now called Morpheus Hotel. And like essentially with Rhino and Grasshopper, we were creating BIM models using scripting only. So everything you can see here is scripted. There's
Mhm.
no manual modeling. So it was essentially my master's in Grasshopper. And that's when I really started to master the fundamentals of Grasshopper and the advanced stuff using the plugin called LE Front. That's where LE Front comes from, the company called Front.
Yeah. Oh,
And
that's yours.
Wow.
yeah,
Really?
yeah. That's,
Oh,
see,
cool.
not many people know that, you know.
Yeah, I did know that. Yeah, nice.
And so yeah, they are the originators of the plugin. Essentially, what the plugin does is give you BIM inside of Rhino and Grasshopper. And so I was sort of doing BIM, but with computation. And I think that was the beginning of like transitioning to being more DT, like an all-rounder where you have BIM and computation. But essentially that project was really like you make this crazy model of all the elements, and then you have to, once you've made this amazing BIM model, reverse that and actually create fabrication information that stuff that's actually going to get built. And these things like got built, and you're dealing with real world problems and spending 90% of your time in Grasshopper scripts. And that's really where like I got my, university of
Green Grasshopper.
yeah, like I got really, and it was a crazy project and crazy hard work, but I learned a lot. Also did like more regular products in terms of like less computation heavy, more technical. Like, so this was Performing Arts Center with Rex. I did with them. So Front do a mix of like kind of they can do advanced stuff, but not everything. It's not just advanced stuff. It's also, this is an advanced facade, but it's obviously not geometrically advanced, but still using early kind of Rhino to Revit workflows, stuff like that. Rhino Inside wasn't around at this point. And then eventually went to Big. And that's when I originally joined as a BIM specialist, but they knew I had a computational background as well. And at the time of joining Big, it was kind of an odd mix in that like there was a BIM team, there was a computational team that was quite. I've thought our Pechakucha timing is still on these, but you had these kind of separate teams, and then over the years we sort of join this all together into design technology, where we were kind of one department where we have BIM, computation, AI, Viz, all this kind of stuff wrapped into one. This was sort of how I described my role at Big, where you, as a DT specialist, you just have this magic box of tricks and, BIM, computation, Rhino Inside, and some other things. And it's quite a unique environment where you're kind of laying down these tracks or helping all the different teams on these like fast-paced projects that are going like a million miles an hour. Not a lot of time for R&D. Like we were kind of R&Ding live exactly like this. So, if the tool doesn't work, it's out the window.
Yeah.
And then, it's a Big for 5.5 years. And so towards the end of that, this is what was happening. Like I was working pretty hard, and then this AI thing just came around, and it's just kind of like, hey, who's this guy? The Chat GPTs, the Mid-Journey, the early days of Mid-Journey and stuff like that. And that's when things really started to shift. We were using, I think this is kind of a good slide to talk about how computation is actually used in Big. So it's multifaceted. It's really like you design with it, you are analyzing it, using it to optimize things, occasionally fabricate, but Big, of course, are not like, we don't build things necessarily at a design firm like Big. AI, and I think this image is kind of good. You see the era. We now look back then. I think we made this when Mid-Journey 3 or 4 came out, and this was like mind blowing. but of course you can see the images are like quite quite
Yeah,
old at this point. So yeah, I think that's sort of been my background for the last few years. Like
cool.
I've been a designer, been in fabrication and technology, but it's always kind of revolved around technology
Mm-hmm.
and the integration of technology. Computation has played a huge role. And now, of course, I'm kind of got two hats. One is running ATN and spreading knowledge around this, much like you guys are also spreading knowledge. And the other hat is working at Facet Homes, where I've joined the company and helped scaling it up, where we're trying to build houses with technology. So like fabrication, BIM, computation, all of that kind of stuff.
Awesome. So let's go. I wanted to explore that part that you mentioned. Back in the days, we didn't have tutorials. We didn't have like ways to learn properly these tools. So you mentioned that you got in touch with it once you graduated. So with Grasshopper. So do you remember like any specific kind of tutorials you used back then? Did you use AAD book back then? Like
Yeah,
what was
Arturo Tedeschi's book, man. That's like the
yeah.
famous book. I think the reason why I started to pick it up more when I was in practice is suddenly I was there with other guys in the office that knew it, and so I could just annoy them and be like, "Hey,
Yeah.
why am I stuck with this?" And you know, there was a couple of people that I'd asked that would just give me a little bit of time, and that little bit of help just goes miles. I think I did do a Grasshopper course in person in London again just before I went to Hong Kong. But yeah, I think it was the book and then just bugging people once I got into practice.
Did you use maybe Grasshopper forum back? That was
Yeah,
alive back in the days.
of
Uh,
course. Yeah,
yeah,
I I wouldn't say I was a known character on it, but I would. Yeah, that was the other place that you'd go and find things.
It's funny. It's funny because like we had a kind of similar experience in terms of asking older colleagues to kind of show us how to do stuff in the office, and that's actually how we learned the most of the things we know now.
Yeah,
Because sometimes you just have a deadline, you need to get to it, you need to find a way, and oftentimes you're stuck. Okay, I need to get this done. So you either go on forum, you ask people there, or you ask colleagues and so on. I wanted also to share with everybody else, guys, this is the book that we're talking about. So we can in the description later on. So then came the specifically, I'm kind of curious about that. You mentioned that Elephant plugin that they did. So did they develop that during your stay there, or it was already developed in
no, they'd
advance?
already developed it at that point, and it was released to the world. And they'd done a few projects with it, but it was like the Morphosis Hotel was like the next generation. It was the next
Mm-hmm.
beast of a project.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably it was definitely the most complicated at that point. And so there was a couple guys. I think originally it was created by two guys, Ramon. I forget how to pronounce his surname. Vanderhuizen. He was going to kill me for that. And another guy called Alan Ty. So they were the original authors, I think, of the plugin, and they'd done a few projects. But yeah, the Morphosis Hotel was kind of like the big test of this workflow at a much larger scale. And then because of that, they developed a bunch of new stuff. And like recently, they did a big Foster's Tower, which was kind of like the next iteration. So the plugin is always evolving as they do these projects. So even now, when I open it, it's like different. Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
different.
just for the audience, guys, you can find on YouTube video of about the Morpheus. I think there is some kind of lecture, and they explain all the how to say all the layers inside the structure, how it's created. So it's really amazing, amazing project.
Yeah.
Did you guys did you guys use any like specific coding languages like C# to do any of this, or was it all coded in
It's
Grasshopper?
mostly all coded in Grasshopper. So Ramon was sort of like the more tool maker who was creating scripts. He would do some C# stuff occasionally when we had like very custom bits and bobs to do. But for the most part, it was standard, kind of Grasshopper with Elephant, and really utilizing the workflows of Elephant, which is quite unique. To really quickly describe it, it's like an ecosystem where you start with a surface from Zaha, and then you split it up and save that into one model. You save all your parameters, and then you open up another Rhino file, and that's work sessioned into that one, and it has its own script. So every file has its own Rhino file, works set file. Oh, sorry, work sharing file, and then a
Yeah.
Grasshopper file, and you'd kind of go through one by one, and it would go from a surface to like a gazillion parts.
Yeah, that's actually quite curious to kind of see how when you have a team of people who are working on similar files, did you guys have some specific organization or naming conventions or specific layering structure? Because when you're working on such a big project, I'm assuming that the organization also needs to be top
Yeah,
notch, right?
that's like the kind of boring but secret sauce to it. And you're sort of learning from the BIM world, which is kind of not typical in Rhino and Grasshopper worlds, right? Like very clear naming standards, folder structures, a layering system. Like it's really boring, but it's how it actually
Yeah,
works. So we
potentially, yeah.
inherited that from the kind of BIM world. Like if you've worked in a Revit model, you'd be very familiar with these things. So yeah, there's very, and then people were organized around different things. So I was like the panel and node guy, and then someone else would be the members, which is the bit between the joints and all that kind of stuff. So you'd have like little blocks of the building you were in charge of. But it was also a very small team. Like we did this with like day to day, there was 3 or 4 people working in Rhino and Grasshopper, a couple of guys like managing and jumping in here and there. But it was quite a small team, and we made like hundreds of thousands of drawings, like literally.
Wow.
So you guys didn't use any kind of BIM tool for that, right? You made your own tool in
Yeah,
Grasshopper,
yeah.
right?
There was times where we would export it from Rhino into IFC or something else, and I think the guys still have to do that sometimes. Like it's in Rhino, but then they need to still deliver a Revit model, and they just kind of chuck the geometry in with Rhino inside or whatever. But yeah, we didn't like the deliverable was not the BIM model. The deliverable was like some drawing that someone in a factory would hold and like bend this thing
Yeah.
into place, or it was some G code for the CNC machine or something like that.
So there was also manual labor involved plus the
Yeah,
CNC
yeah, yeah.
cutting, right?
So it was built in China.
Oh,
So there was kind of CNC machine. There was manually operated machinery. So, for example, rolling the panels, like someone puts it in and it rolls it to a specific dimension, and then it gets to a certain point. It's like hand assembled.
I'm assuming that needs to be super precise because at the end of the day, you need to assemble it. Like, did you guys have any sort of like small physical models, maquettes, creating like seeing how the joints are gonna work, or you just did it,
Well, yeah, I
you know,
mean,
refinement?
you'll make mock-ups. So we made a couple full-scale mock-ups to test different
Mm-hmm.
systems, and actually, we realized the first system could be improved a lot. So, like, essentially, the panels came pre-made. So imagine it's like the panel of a door or something, and then the steel had brackets, and so it just kind of you just connect it to the steel, but then you need to shimmy it into place. So it has to move in like 4 different or 5 different axes.
Okay, I
So
see. And is there any kind of like a
yeah,
buffer space.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
about tolerances and being able to like
Yeah.
move these things in and out. And you know, it sounds weird that it's done manually, but that's the only way you can build like that. Like this idea of robots placing these things is just complete bullshit in real life.
Yeah, probably takes more time
Yeah,
to set it up
yeah,
than to do it.
yeah.
Cool. And then so later on, when you moved to Big, um, tell us a little bit about that whole experience, because we have a lot of people here who, are looking up to firms like Big, and that's normal because they really do amazing architecture. And even when we were at university, Big was also always on the showcase of the best projects of the world. So can you tell us a little bit about experience there? I'm kind of interested to know about um, going from a design to the actual production, like that whole process you mentioned earlier. Like from Zach, you get a shape, then you need to kind of optimize it for production. So was the process in Big kind of similar with like that, or did they have some kind of special system
Yeah,
for that?
so when I joined Big, I think like you, I think with all firms from the outside, you feel like there's all this incredible technology going on. When you get inside, you realize it's sort of all pieced together by like, you know, a few really talented people that are designing and doing these things. So, for example, when I joined Big, there was a very established BIM team. Like the BIM side was very strong. The computational side was a bit unique, where they had a very strong computational team, but it was almost only dedicated to simulation and environmental analysis, like that kind of thing. They did do some geometry stuff as well, but it was mostly focused on that. And you sort of had to book them to use them and all this kind of stuff. And then all the other stuff just floated around between basically designers that were quite good at Grasshopper, or, you know, were really into visualization, or like, you know, they just had some kind of skill. And I think what's interesting looking back at Big, like it kind of was part of that parametric era. And I think for a long time they kind of just were, they attract really great people, and they could do a bit of Grasshopper. But when I joined I saw that there was a gap between like intermediate Grasshopper, where the designers were creating this stuff, and then they could create, like, let's say the Serpentine Gallery, or like the Vancouver House, or stuff like that. I would look back at those old files, and like it would be made up to a point computationally, and then manually, you know, made.
Great.
Um, which is quite typical, you know. And I felt like there was just a missing gap where we could take it one more step and still utilize computation. So like I said, I joined initially on the BIM side purely, but then I started to do more computational stuff, and people started to know I had a computational background. So essentially, you as a DT specialist in Big, you're like an in-house resource that people can just come and ask you some questions.
Mhm.
You get assigned to projects for like more BIM stuff, but computation was more like ad hoc. And so teams would like maybe create the essence of a script, but then get stuck, or like, hey, we know we can do this. And that's when they reach out to the DT team and be like, can you help with this? You know, we have this facade and there's like a million different panels. Can we optimize it down to 10? And so it was a lot of that. Like there was no, you know, standard protocol for computation. BIM there totally was. So like once all projects were done just outside of Revit in concept stage, and as soon as they come out of concept, no matter what, they go into Revit. And then that's why you then get assigned like a BIM person and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, the computation was a bit more ad hoc, and it was really like you have to also market yourself a little bit inside the firm. And again, this is not unique to Big. I think this is for many firms. Is like you're the computational person. Come talk to me when you have this problem.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck on the Grasshopper forum when you can come ask us.
What about, like you mentioned, that they pushed the projects from the design phase to BIM through Revit back then? So does that mean, I'm assuming yes, but did they do the whole project in Revit from scratch again, or did they import some of the things from Rhino, or import massing in Revit and then go from there?
Yes,
What is always a new project in Revit every single time?
is a little bit of both. So this was also the unique thing when I was there, was Rhino Inside started to emerge in like 2019 or something. So I joined in 2018, where I was kind of using Speckle back then. There was Flux, was that kind of era. That was called like G-Revit or something. There was all these plugins where you click a button and it like appears in Revit, which sort of sometimes worked and sometimes didn't work. So typically, depending on how messy the concept model was for various reasons, like sometimes designs gets changed and it's 2 a.m. and you maybe not model things super nice. Depending on the state of the model, if there was stuff that was key, we would try and bring it across, like key things like the grid, right, and or like the outline of the building or the facade surface or something like that. If it was good, right, and we would try and use tools like Rhino Inside a lot towards the when I was there. But sometimes you would model it fresh because it was kind of like a clean slate to work out some of the stuff, and particularly around like stairs, right? Like in concept, yeah, you're missing one step. That's fine. It's concept. But then when you do it in Revit, you're like, oh crap. Yeah, and so like stuff like that, you would actually rely more on Revit because you kind of go back and right, this is the time to just refine these things, which is literally the point of schematic design. But other things like facades, particularly if they were like, quite a lot going on, you could take the Rhino geometry and then in the script snap it to grid lines or whatever. So then you could sort of fix the messiness and then generate it in Revit. And so depending on the project, you could generate the entire shell of the building. So then the teams start with something. In others, you would just maybe generate a couple pieces. So yeah, it was always a mix. I mean, and that was the challenge of working at somewhere like big, is it's kind of a blessing and curse in that, like, it's interesting because every single project is unique. It's also really difficult to make workflows for the office because every time things are made in a different way, and they challenge what is a wall in Revit is now a roof, and they do atypical stuff. So
yeah, but I guess you learn a lot from this experience.
Yeah, I think you become like a master of like cowboy tricks to to fix these things. Yeah, like oh, I know we can. Revit won't like that as a wall, but there's a plugin that will do it, and it will work for this stage, and blah blah blah.
And just for the reference, how big was that team for the computational design in Big?
So that's the other thing with Big, is the DT teams were never really very big. We were always like more of a skeleton crew, particularly when you compared yourself with the Fosters and Grimshaws and this kind of stuff, where they have quite large DT teams. So loosely, each office would have like a DT team of like three to 4 people as the DT team, including BIM, computation. Copenhagen did have a bigger computation team because they had like simulation and stuff all in that one spot. But it was something like one specialist to 75 bigsters or something like that. So it's quite small. Whereas like somewhere like Foster's maybe has one R&D person for, or one specialist for every 15 people, something like that.
Well, do you think now it's similar type of structure, or do you think they increase the number of people who
Right
are
now
working
they decreased it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's another story. But I think, you know, we had a good team and we had a good structure, and you know, for one thing or another, people left. Like I left to go and pursue more of like a startup world. And some other people like Jens is now working at Motif. He's also in the startup world. So they're kind of now replacing and
Yeah, we're also well, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, I always wanted to ask, for example, we all know about big diagrams and their kind of story of this of the concept, that how the building evolves and how the concept grows, and what it means to have the final building. But I wanted to ask, how much does Grasshopper scripting play the role in terms of giving you the ability to have many different iterations of a similar design? Like, how much that does that play into the whole kind of system of deciding, okay, this is going to be our number one design? Like,
Yeah, I think to be fair, at that stage, computation plays a role in that you can maybe explore more ideas. Um,
mhm.
if you script it, it's sort of like a two-way. Again, it's like a curse and a blessing at the same time. So at that very early stage, you see the team like coming up with many different ideas. So when you script something, you kind of invest a little bit of time in scripting it, unless you're pretty advanced. And like, you know, some cases it would take me the same amount of time to script as it would model. So scripting is always going to be the choice, because you can mess around with the sliders and explore more ideas.
Mhm.
But I think at that early stage, yeah, it's like you invest a lot of time in creating the script of this idea, but then you may go in a completely different
That may not
idea, right?
happen.
So
Yeah.
at that stage, you really have to. The advantage is being able to sketch in Grasshopper, if that makes sense. Which is a little bit of a, you have to be quite advanced, and so the truth be told, at that stage, like if the team has a couple advanced people in it, I think I would see them use more Grasshopper. If not, it would be a mixture of manual and like really good. You know, this is where actually being a good Rhino modeler can really help, because you know they can just model some stuff very quickly. So at that early stage, like people are exploring loads of different design ideas. Computation can help, particularly depending on the idea. But then it's when you start to hone in on this is the direction, you can really start to utilize computation to like add detail really, really quickly, which means you can see the full thing in more detail and then decide, oh, maybe let's go back or let's keep going or whatever.
Awesome. Yeah. Um, in terms of like, we had a lot of people asking, you know, are Grasshopper and Rhino now kind of standard, like for people who want to do architecture in these big firms? In your experience, definitely it is. But can you tell us again, like, how do you see right now the situation in the world in terms of using these tools? Uh, is there anything also other than running Grasshopper that people should be aware of?
Yeah, so I think 100% Rhino is a must, and it kind of you need to be pretty good at Rhino, like at least an intermediate level, right, to work at these firms. And like one of the questions we always ask on our Archi-Tech tours is, what software do you use? And before we hit record, I deliberately explain, like, this is a deliberately stupid question, because I just want to show to the world that everyone is using the same stuff. Like everyone is in Rhino, Everyone uses Grasshopper to help with various things. Everyone is using Revit and so on and so forth. So Rhino for sure is like a must, and Grasshopper is becoming more and more commonplace. I would like I can't say you will not you cannot work at these places if you don't know Grasshopper. It's not true, as long as you're very good at Rhino. But if you do know Grasshopper, you become very valuable. And when I look back, it's no coincidence that like the standout go-to designers in a lot of these firms were very good at Grasshopper, right? They had that computation skill. So yeah, Rhino is a must. Grasshopper is a real bonus. And Revit is still really valuable as well. It's kind of, it's not as sexy, but it is really important. And you know, the rendering and all that kind of stuff.
I'm curious about you mentioned this competition teams. So how about the scripting? Do you guys use C#, Python, or I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. So I think the DT team would use that. Yeah. But even myself, I'm a pretty poor coder. Like I would say I'm a master at Grasshopper, you know, more than like coding. But then there would be people in the team that would have like that more advanced coding skills, and they would be more tool making rather than workflow making, if that makes sense. And same for the BIM side. You would still see a lot of Python is probably the most common thing. Like PyRevit is amazing. So I'd say Python is probably the most common. I'd say like the purists are making it in C# because of the efficiencies and but yeah, I'll be honest. I was more of a Grasshopper wizard than a coding wizard. But for sure, like there's people on the specialist team, but as a designer, that would, you know, you would not need to know that kind of stuff.
If you remember, we met a couple of guys last year at a Rhinos conference in Barcelona who were developers. They were specifically the developers for Herzog and de Mero, and they had like a team of people who were just coding, and that's it. They did have architectural background, but then they just learned coding, and they said, okay, enough of architecture, let's go to coding.
Yeah, they create like some kind of in-house
tools.
Yeah. So that was like, yeah, and a lot of firms do have that. We went to UN Studio firm, and they actually had like a full-time developer called Cristobal, who, again, a bit like that, he was an architect, but he also like grew up in Silicon Valley and learned how to, you know, properly develop tools and stuff like that. So it's becoming more common that you'll have like some proper developers and tool makers within the specialist teams. And now with AI, you see that a bit more. Like these guys are now making the AI tools and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
How do you see what, when we're on the topic of AI? Like, since you're completely in technology, I'm assuming that you are, you know, playing with all of these tools. When it started a couple of years, like 2 years ago, I guess it started. What did you first think of it, and the expectations you had back then, did they fulfill now or no?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. We're opening up a can of worms here, but I mean, obviously blown away at the beginning, right? We never we never thought. I think the scary thing was the creative side sort of came first, right? The Mid-Journey, everyone was creating the images and everything, right? And that was like diffusion, all that kind of stuff. So I've been really torn, and I talk to people like on a weekly basis about this. Like, I think it's been mind blowing, and it's definitely disrupting the industry, and it will disrupt the industry. At the same time, I didn't really see it change the design process that much. For example, in Big, or even as we've been touring all these different offices, I see a lot of the same story. Like, yes, they'll explore more and iterate more image diffusion stuff. It's now sped up visualization because I can basically create a render from a model. So like on the design side, but ultimately the thinking, and particularly at Big, like the thinking was still the same. Like it didn't really actually disrupt the design process. It just sped up parts of the design process, which ultimately gives you more time to design. And then once like ChatGPT came and LLM started to rise, again, it didn't really disrupt the design process. The firms that were doing the most like game-changing innovative stuff was actually kind of really boring things where like you put in all of your knowledge from the firm, like standard details, like all of your project directory. So you can now just type up, have we done an airport? And it spits back, here's the 10 airports we've done, and they're this much a meter squared and blah, blah, blah. Like that's so valuable. Like how many firms have made like a kind of wiki website where you have to, it's kind of clunky. So I think LLMs really affected the process side. But yeah, I'm really torn. Like I think there's a huge opportunity. I question whether the big firms can move quick enough. Little firms, you see like the new kids on the block, like the Tim Foos, the Will Gardners, and like these kind of characters, they can move quite quickly, but they're still trying to find their feet from a design perspective. The big firms have it the other way around. Like they can implement these things really quickly, or they can create these things really quickly, but it's kind of like moving a tanker. You got to get the whole firm to buy into it and like convince the partners. And yeah, it is. It can be slower. So yeah, I think for sure it's going to disrupt our industry, and those that don't adopt it will get left behind. At the same time, I haven't really seen disruption. Like I've got to be honest, the Viz industry, yes. You can iterate faster, yes. And actually, I think the two observations is, one, I think there's a worry that like we've actually let the thinking go. Like the thinking process, I was always amazed watching the teams at Big, where they'd research all these different things, right? And then they find a nugget here and a nugget here, and that would create the essence of a project. And it was like some historic reference, or in another one, it was maybe environmental, whatever. But now you kind of just go straight to the image. It's like, oh, here's a cool twisty tower. And the why has sort of been forgotten because we can go straight to the image. And then the second thing, which I think the biggest disruption we've seen, is actually marketing. Like AI has transformed how architects can market themselves. And I think, people like Tim Fu is a really, really good example where suddenly like the amount of architects with over 100,000 subscribers on anything or followers was pretty small. I think like Chris Precht was the latest like influencer architect or architect that became famous on Instagram or whatever you want to call it. And then there was the Bjarkes and all that. Now I just seem to find like so many people. Yeah. And I think Tim's a great example of this, because I think he was the one riding the wave where, he was able to feed as architects, we can now feed the hungry algorithm of Instagram, where you're competing against like influencers that literally take a selfie and that's their content. Right. So like the content creation is like 1 to 2 seconds, right? Or like maybe an hour if you got to stage everything. But when you think about an architect, like to create a quick project is hard, like before AI, right? Even if you're very quick at sketching and very good at real-time rendering, it still took time. But now you could create an images that were really compelling and create like your portfolio and philosophy and put it out there and feed that hungry algorithm, get a following, and somewhere was some needles in the haystack of a client, and boom, you could start your practice. I think Tim is a great example of this. Like, he was working at Zaha, and then he blew up, and now he's got his own practice. So I think that's the thing maybe that people aren't thinking about as much, is really blown marketing away.
I remember one of his viral videos when he, showed a paper,
Yeah.
like,
Oh yeah, as well. Yeah,
paper,
like a
and
crumbled paper,
yeah,
and then
crumbled
became a building.
paper that became
Yeah,
a
and
building. Yeah.
I mean, there's also timing, and I think, like,
Yeah,
his timing was perfect. But yeah, I think there's something in that. Like, now you don't necessarily have to get bogged down with creating all these products to create your own portfolio, to create your own firm, kind of thing. Yeah, and now you see that with videos and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was what I was gonna ask next. Have you seen these new engines that can create videos, animations out of single
Yeah.
image, and then like kind of creates the animation for you of just one single image? And I think I mean, it's not perfect, but it's good enough to kind of show the idea, right? And one thing that I'm still waiting to see is similar type of technology, but for 3D modeling, and to actually produce models which are worthy of showing, in terms of, just like LLMs can spit out, like you say, okay, I want a chair and blah blah blah, right? So how do we get to the level where, okay, the 3D modelers are not going to be needed anymore? So I think I mean, it's getting there, but I still don't see anything that it's quite revolutionary in that
I've
regard.
seen a couple people. Chantel Matar, she seems to be creating some pretty amazing forms from images. Also, is Ismail. He was posting some stuff. I know Tim's probably also done some as well. But again, even if they're really well done, it's just a mesh. It's like if you do like the wrap command in Rhino. So I think, again, to get to like the 3D model that we need is like quite accurate and quite precise. I feel like that is really far away. But I think you'll still be able to like create the essence of an idea, animate it, get that 3D model, and then work from there. You can add detail to the model. So, I can see where it's like it's getting closer and closer and closer. But I think BIM is like a beast that's not gonna be solved for a while. I think I could be completely wrong, but
yeah. Well, we'll see. Time will tell. The only thing is that, from my personal experience, like 6 months ago, I could not create anything in terms of small applications. Now I create small apps for every single thing I need that I want to automate, right? So before I didn't know, Python, C#, anything. Like right now you have tools that you can use, that you can simply in English say, okay, I need a software for that. It needs to do A, B, and C, and it actually spits out the code. Of course, you need to check it. If it works, you test it. But at the end, you get the working product. And this is something that, half a year ago, it wasn't really possible.
Yeah, you even created some Rhino plugins.
Yeah. Also, we created a couple of plugins for Rhino, and we're not, the developers. And it was really interesting to see, like, okay, it's working. For example, there was a plugin that we showed in the workshop. When you're modeling and you always want to reference some images, but there wasn't any kind of way to kind of see the image inside of the panel of Rhino, and you need to kind of import it in the viewport. So we created like a small plugin that does that can import images and also videos. So you can actually watch a tutorial. It's gonna display there in the panel, and you can kind of follow along in Rhino window. So
it seems like that process side is more powerful than the creative image generation stuff.
Tell us a little bit about, like, ATN. Like, how did you decide to go in that direction? And I mean, I'm sure you noticed at Big, graduates coming in, and like, did you see the disconnect between people who graduate and then people who are working there for more years?
Yeah.
Like, how does their knowledge compare with when you sit from now? This
Yeah, so
perspective.
it's sort of, I always wanted to do something in this space, like of teaching in some form. At the time I was in America, so it was not so easy for me to teach because I was like in a university. So like
Mhm.
your visa means you can only work for Big basically. Um, so I was like, you know, at least you can put stuff out for free, and and instead of teaching like 10 people in a university, I could put the same thing online and it could reach thousands, and it's basically the same amount of effort. So that was like my high level thought, and then I started to teach for different platforms like Think Parametric and other ones. And then I felt a couple things. Like, one, there was this gap between university and practice, and so like even designers at Big would come in, they're from top universities, very smart people, but they still would just need to be taught the basics of Revit and Grasshopper. Like, a lot of people still coming out of university did not know the basics of Grasshopper. They just never really grasped it. And I always asked them the same thing, like, are you taught any of this at university with, the hundreds of thousands, the thousands of pounds you spend at university? And they're like, no, we were given like a week training or told to learn it from YouTube. So I was like, first of all, that's ridiculous when you're paying that much money.
So much money,
Um,
yeah.
and so I was teaching this inside Big, and I was like, well, let's just teach it outside to the rest of the world and try and make it as accessible as possible. And Big were pretty cool about me teaching online and stuff like that, which was very lucky because not all firms are like that. And then COVID came, and I've been thinking about like, oh yeah, I want to do a podcast as well, and all these different things. And then Clubhouse emerged, which was this stupid app where, well, it's now, yeah, it's now
Forgotten.
forgone. It's well on X, right? X have the same thing where it's
Yeah.
like it's just a chat room, but it was incredible, man. You were you were like in a room. I was in a room with Snoop Dogg once talking about NFTs at the time, and it was just like everyone was locked at home in lockdown, and you had this weird app where there was no video, so you could just be sitting there in your pants. And we decided, right, let's be one of the first ones there to talk about architecture stuff, and that's where it began. And we just hosted podcasts about architecture and technology stuff. And then fast forward to today, and we share knowledge in these four ways of our podcasts, our videos, so the tours and video logs, events. So tomorrow we're hosting our Pecha in the pub on BIM 2.0, all these new people building the next generation, the next Rhinos and the next Revits, which is pretty cool. And then our online courses, right? And it's just kind of grown from there. It was a podcast, then I started a YouTube channel, and then I did the course, and we now try and just focus on these four things. But I think we were just chatting. It's like, the challenges of creating like social media and growing channels. And
Marketing,
it's
yeah.
it's a
It's all.
challenge. It takes a lot of work. As you guys said, like there's peaks and troughs. Like, last year there was loads of hype about the tours, and then this year they're like people have got bored of them already. So you got to create something new, and yeah, it's crazy. Oh, I don't know if I lost your guys' audio.
Okay, there we go. We're
Oh,
back.
yeah, you're
Yeah,
good.
so there was a glitch on our side. So I was saying, yeah, you're in a constant, hamster wheel of creating content and trying to, be up to date with everything that's happening. I remember there was one cool tutorial we created like 2 months ago of LLM, a Gemini, teaching me how to build something in Rhino. and it actually you can see your screen. And I asked it, okay, I need to create this roof, this building. Show me what to do. Show me which commands to type. And I was listening to it, and it was like kind of telling me. And it actually invented a couple of new commands that didn't exist. But at the end, it was like kind of half, like it knew most of the commands, but it also invented some of them. So it was kind of funny. All right, awesome. So now maybe we should answer some of the questions we got from the audience, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Check the chat first, maybe.
Yeah, let's see if we have some questions in the chat.
I remember, this question maybe.
Okay. I wonder, how can someone who has never worked in computational design position get into such a role?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because there's no like fixed route. I mean, I did teach at IAC for a year, and so now there are these kind of master programs that you can do, which can be a quicker way to get into the specialist space. I mean, another way is to like start as a designer and then transition when you're in a firm, right?
Try to use it in the company if you can.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, to get a job as a specialist, you need to be a specialist. So
Sure.
you kind of have to find a way to get that experience. Like, just become like a legend at whatever it is you want to do. Create cool stuff. Teach yourself more and more, and then get into a firm and work your way up. Or like I did. I think I was very lucky. I found Front, which was kind of gave me experience and teaching at the same time, which then gave me like this special thing which no one else had. And then Big saw that and was like, oh, this guy's kind of doing computational BIM. We've not seen that before. And so I think in this world of AI, that could be quite, you could be an AI specialist quite quickly, because there aren't many that are really specializing in it right now.
Yeah. We have one kind of long question from Alejandro. He was asking why, like, he notices a lot of these big names like your name and Mariana Cabrera, Tim Fu, other people who usually work for these big companies. At some point, they, go to the next step. So is this because of the burnout, or is it because of the something else? I don't think there's like a universal answer for that. Everybody has their own reasons, I guess.
Yeah, I'll be totally honest. Like, I think working for one of these big famous firms, I think that you either commit and then try and get to the top and become a partner, and which is great. And I would have continued at Big and done that if that was what I wanted to do. But I think a lot of people join to get the experience and learn in this crazy environment, and then go and start their own thing. And I think a lot of these firms also know that, right? And actually, Big is very good at that, because they're very open when you come and also when you leave. Like, you don't just get kicked out the door as you hand in your notice, right? It's actually somewhat celebrated. Like, you get a t-shirt, like they'll make you a leaving t-shirt. They also kind of keep tabs on what you do afterwards, which I think comes from OMA like has a bit more of a what's the word, like lineage thing. But ultimately, I think, there's only so much opportunity to continue to grow, and also, let's be honest, make money, right? Yeah. You can earn good money at these firms. It's totally doable. But you spend more time there. And I think the time we're in right now, there's a lot of opportunities. And that's why you see more people like joining the startup world right now, like I've done, and some of my other colleagues from Big and other companies. But yeah, you get the guys that will stay there and they'll become partners or super associates or whatever you want to call it, and it's a great way to go because you work on amazing projects and you're part of these amazing companies. But you know, a lot of them go, you get your experience, and then you go do something else.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think it's great in terms of getting really unique experience working in these
Yeah.
offices and to learn, amazing stuff that you couldn't learn probably in a small office, I would say.
Yeah, yeah.
We have connected question to this one. So would love to ask Oliver if he would advise young architects to join these big companies. It's like the
Uh,
reverse.
I would. You know, I would. It depends on the firm.
Yeah.
I can only speak to my own experience. Like, Big was an amazing experience. I was very fortunate. It was the firm I always wanted to work for, and I managed somehow to sneak my way in. And whilst I was there, I had a great time. So for me, it really worked out. Um, you do work quite hard and you do work quite intensely. That's sort of just the environment that you're in. Firms are getting better at that, though. Like, I think they're conscious people, you know, are not just working endlessly at night. And also, this new generation are kind of
They
not.
don't work all night.
Yeah, they're like, you know, I'm not doing this stuff. So I think culture is changing. I would, but I would view it as like in those two ways. You either go there to get some experience and go, or you kind of go there and like, this is my home and I'm going to commit and, you know, climb the ladder or whatever it is for that firm.
Oh,
But yeah, it can really depend on the firm as well.
this question is also connected with another question. So, do you think master is important for large firms such as Big or IDIS? And also, the question is, the second question was, if you ever did any kind of portfolios, like if you were reviewing portfolios of students at Big, like what were some of the things that you would notice and that would stand out?
So masters, I mean, it's a kind of tricky one to answer because a lot of these firms you kind of need a master's to
Sure.
get to that next stage. So you kind of have to have it. Do I think it's like the be all and end all? Maybe no. I do recommend masters like IAC, and if you can kind of kill two birds with one stone, and it's like a master's that makes you become an architect, but then you also learn some computational stuff. I think that's a really good way to go. And then in terms of like portfolio, it has to be clean, concise, and eye grabbing. Because you do kind of flick through them pretty quick when you get like, especially a Big, you know, even for specialist roles we get a lot. So design roles, it's crazy.
Maybe now AI is checking it.
Yeah. And actually they probably get more applications because people are just using AI to apply. I think you just have to have a really clean and concise. One of the key things is just like, architects are quite fickle. Like, they love good, simple graphic design. So if you have a portfolio that is very a consistent language, cleanly laid out, shows off your work, that's what you need to do. But also, sometimes the most important thing is not just your portfolio, but maybe having a little connection. Like, reach out to someone on LinkedIn, and what's the worst they're going to do? Is like not reply.
Yeah.
Fine.
What's
You
the
know. Yeah, and then maybe that person will be. They'll go, hey, you should check out this portfolio, and you know, someone actually looks at it in more depth. So yeah, you need a good portfolio. It's like something that should just be a standard. But that's not the only thing to get into these roles. Like, go to conferences. Like, we got a Pechakucha tomorrow. Come to it. You'll meet some of the people there, and grab a beer with them.
Awesome. All right, guys. So Oliver, would like to thank you for joining us. I would like to also possibly invite you for some future talk as well, and maybe
Yeah,
we
for
can
sure.
catch up sometime to talk about YouTube. In
Yeah,
interesting topic.
yeah. I feel we could do a podcast just on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly,
On
exactly,
YouTube.
exactly. So once again, thank you all for joining us. I hope that you guys enjoyed the talk with Oliver Thomas. And yeah, tomorrow we have another guest, Gediminas. He is also the fellow educator on YouTube. So we're gonna have a call with him tomorrow. And yeah, good night, everybody, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.